financial survival network, helping you survive and thrive in the new economy. Go to CarrieLutz.com and sign up for 30 free micro trainings on financial survival.
$14.90 WGCH. This is Kerry Lutz. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network. Today is a big day. It is February 21st, 2012. Gold in the past 2 days up over $30 an ounce, 33. Silver up over $1. My next guest is going to explain why and why it's probably going to continue. Ron Hera, how are you today?
How you doing, Kerry?
Doing great, and welcome back to the show. We always enjoy having you on because you know your stuff. So what's up with the prices today, Ron?
Well, we're seeing a rally in the price of gold and silver today. Gold was up about $20 last time I looked. I think it came down from that level. But basically, we're seeing the metals rise, and the news, of course, today is that the new Greek bailout package. And I think that the markets are generally up as a result. So there's some celebration with the idea that Greece has a new lease on life. But more importantly, and this gets to the metals, this bailout is a temporary solution. It's just another instance of sort of kicking the can down the road. It doesn't ultimately solve anything for Greece. It doesn't actually reduce the amount of debt.
Yeah, and it's all about keeping that euro going. And listening to Jim Rickard's book now, Currency Wars, and this is all part of it. Everybody knows that the euro is dead. They all know that it's a weekend at Bernie's. Bernie's dead, but it's in everybody's interest to keep the dead guy walking around and looking like he's still alive, even though he's starting to, let's say, rigor mortis is setting in, right?
Well, I agree with Jim that the euro is a political union. I mean, it's really more of a trade agreement and a political idea than it is actually an economic union, in the sense that there is no federal treasury in Europe. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously the problem. It would be like the states of the United States each being able to issue their own bonds. And all having automatically having the same credit rating, and that would be very chaotic. So that's the situation with the European countries. So they need to either, basically integrate all the way, or they need to have a mechanism where countries can leave the euro, and maybe they'll be able to do the haircuts and eventually get Greece back on track. But right now, Greece is in a depression, and the problem is just going on.
And it's spreading, and a lot of bad stuff is going on there, and really, it's really insoluble because the debt can't be paid, so it really needs to be written off. But there's a lot of banks whose balance sheets are hanging in the balance, so to speak, right?
Well, that's right, and the debate right now across Europe really is that the bailouts are inflationary measures. I mean, with the ECB stepping in, and basically every time they're doing a bailout like this, it is inflationary, more or less directly, depending on the structure of the particular bailout. But at the end of the day, everybody knows that the euro is being devalued by these actions.
Mm-hmm. And inflation's good for the stock market in general, right?
Well, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, if the currency falls, prices rise and the stock market rises. And in the United States, the interventions that have happened in the past, particularly QE1 and 2, that's basically injected a lot of liquidity into the system. So it basically is responsible for the rally in the Dow since 2008.
Yeah.
Well, since 2009.
Right. So there we are now, and you had some comments on one of our segments that we had recently.
Yeah, I listened with great interest to the debate that you ran between Yaron Brook of the Ayn Rand Institute and Doug Casey of Casey-Brook. I thought that was fascinating because it really frames, I think, the problem that we face today in the United States, which essentially is that the size of government is just too big for the economy.
Right, and when you have that type of situation where you have profligate government, it's really out of control, there's no incentives, it seems, to rein it in, inevitably have a loss of freedom with that too, right?
Well, yeah, and there's an increase, ironically, an increase in dependency on the government. So as the government grows and encroaches in, on different aspects of the economy through regulation and through taxation, it actually encumbers businesses and damages the ability of businesses to operate and to provide benefits for employees. So those benefits then come from the government. So there's basically a transfer that goes on, and it's more than that, because when the government redistributes wealth, essentially it takes wealth or money from one group of people and redistributes it to another group of people. That presupposes that the government has the power to do that. And the problem with that is that the actual loss of rights from the people who've had money or property confiscated from them, those rights aren't transferred to the people who receive the economic benefit. Those rights accrue to the government. So the more wealth is redistributed, the more powerful the government becomes, and it's a centralization of control, which is very harmful to freedom.
Yeah, and that, to me, both sides of the debate really agreed on that point, and really, while Doug Casey's position was the best government is no government at all, and Yaron's position was the best government is a limited government that only exists to protect your rights, I think, in essence, they wouldn't admit it. I think there was a lot more agreement between them than disagreement, right?
Well, I think they certainly agreed with respect to the government being too large and unsupportable by the economy insofar as it is too large, and the fact that a large government is really the antithesis of individual rights and freedom. So that they definitely did agree with. I think the essence of the debate was really between, whether not whether you should have a big government or small government, but whether government is necessary at all. And I personally think that there are things that governments can do. For example, providing for the common defense, or allowing for a peaceful settlement of disputes, punishing certain kinds of crimes or fraud. So those are things that I see would be very difficult for the free market to provide a solution. So I'm not personally willing to say that there shouldn't be a government, but I'm certainly open to considering that possibility. But I'm not willing to go that far at this point. I think there are useful things that a government can do. The question is, how far should the government go? I mean, how large should the government be? What we've had in the United States is essentially government creep. It's just gotten larger and larger, and essentially asserted itself in more and more different areas of the economy. Often accompanied by disaster, incidentally, in terms of interference in the marketplace and in the economy. And it's gotten to a point where it's really out of control.
Yeah, it really is. It started out as a government with specific powers, and all other powers were reserved to the states and the people. And now it's really become a government of unlimited powers, because if they can tell you what insurance you have to have, if they can tell you that you have to eat broccoli and not eat junk food, and if they can tell you, like you said, how many gallons of water your toilet's flushing, what type of light bulbs you can buy, then where is freedom? Where is individual initiative? And where's the individual fit into all this?
Yeah, all of those things basically encumber the economy. They impose costs on consumers, and then, of course, the government bureaucracy itself requires to be funded by taxes. So it's really a sort of a double cost for consumers, because they both pay the taxes and then also are encumbered by limited choices and by being forced to deal with various kinds of regulations. That's even more pertinent for small businesses, insofar as we really have a situation where the burden of government regulation has gotten to a point where it's really not just encumbering small businesses, but really crushing small businesses to the point where we just have no job growth anymore. And it's really simple. If you talk to business owners, the problem in this situation is that not just because the economy is poor, but business owners don't want to hire people. They don't want to hire people because there's too many risks, there's too many liabilities, and there's just too many costs. And those costs are all imposed, well, not all of them really, but a lot of those costs are imposed by government regulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had this discussion before with Peter Schiff over at Europac, and you have to be insane to want to hire somebody in this day and age because, you're subjected to a multitude of regulatory forces, of potential liability, of lawsuits, and high costs. It's easier to outsource, whether it's within the United States or outside of the United States. That's what businesses all over are choosing to do, and that's what really it winds up hurting the people who it's supposedly intended to help, this big government. And like you said, no job growth and foundering economic prospects for the country and the world as a whole as a result.
Yeah, and it's anti-competitive. I mean, I agree completely with Peter on this point, and it's anti-competitive insofar as really, as the burden increases, it disproportionately falls on small businesses. In other words, if you require businesses to provide various kinds of benefits, it's the smaller companies that can't afford to provide those benefits. So they go out of business, or they just don't grow, they don't hire anybody. Maybe they lay people off because their costs are higher, and there's a cost of compliance, regulatory compliance. Companies today commonly have compliance officers. Their whole job is to make sure that the company is in compliance with government regulations. Well, a small business, let's say there's a handful of people in the company, what are you going to hire, a compliance officer? You can't carry a whole employee just to comply with government regulations. It's impossible. So what this does is it really stamps out small businesses. I mean, that's the effect, right, is that small businesses are being systematically stamped out as the government grows, as the burden of government grows, because only the larger companies can in fact, afford to operate under those conditions. So while the world becomes, the market is in effect guaranteed for the benefit of large companies, for multinational corporations, for example, but by the same token, small businesses are being crushed.
Yeah, and you make a great point. Like GE can afford to have skyscrapers full of attorneys, figuring out how to comply with new laws, new taxes, new credits, how to wind up paying no taxes. But the average small business doesn't have that luxury available, so they're either going to have to pay or outsource or close up. And now, in today's world, from personal experience, outsourcing is easier than ever. You can outsource literally any operations other than things that require real face-to-face contact to numerous people around the world who will gladly take your dollars, and it means a whole new standard of living to them. It's really kind of amazing. It's sad if you're an American worker who's unemployed because your government has done this to you, but on the other hand, businesses are always going to find a way.
Yeah, you really don't have, much prospect if you're a U.S. citizen. I mean, a lot of people who are out of work today that lost their jobs maybe 2-3 years ago during 2008 or 2009 or 2010, those people, a lot of them will just not find jobs again. I mean, except maybe bagging groceries at Walmart, for example. But a lot of these people really are displaced workers. That's the correct term. They're displaced. There isn't another industry for them to go into. The industry that they've had their career in is really no longer a viable field for them to be in anymore. So obviously that's going to disproportionately affect older workers. But I wanted to go back just for a second to the earlier point about how the encumbrance of government regulations and taxation as it increases falls disproportionately on small businesses, because I wanted to point out that there's actually a very unhealthy relationship between some of the largest companies and the government, and the Dodd-Frank banking laws are a great example of this. The universal health care bill is another example of this, where it's the large companies that have the resources. Those are the ones who have the lobbyists, and they actually write a lot of these laws and regulations. So it's really kind of in their interest to make the process very cumbersome, because that basically guarantees them market share. That guarantees that small competitors will not rise. They actually are creating a barrier to entry, stopping growing companies from basically competing with them. It's completely anti-competitive. So there's a very unhealthy relationship. I mean, in an economic sense, a very unhealthy, destructive relationship between some of the largest companies that have a lot of lobbying muscle and the government.
Yeah, hey, what you're saying is totally true. Goes back to the Pure Food and Drug Act and the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission, but Pure Food and Drug Act was pushed through by the large slaughterhouses using, what was the name, Upton Sinclair, to say, oh, the horrible conditions in the slaughterhouses, because they knew the smaller guys could not afford the regulatory overhead, and it would enhance the larger slaughterhouses' competitive position. So they pushed for this, and they pushed for it, and they eventually got it. Anti-competitive regulation is anti-competitive by nature. Government is anti-competitive, and it's all about picking winners and losers. And if you're on the losing side, you're unhappy, but there's nothing you can do about it. And if you're on the winning side, then you think we have the greatest government ever created by man. Anyway, Ron, we gotta get going. So, where do we find you on the internet, and how do we subscribe?
HeraResearch.com. HERA Research.com.
All right, excellent. And we'll be talking to you again in a couple of weeks.